Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about ZK rollups and what they are. If you like this kind of content, you should definitely watch this video to the end, like, comment, subscribe, check out our Patreon and all our other videos. Not financial advice, we don't accept liabilities for losses that you might incur, and everything here is strictly for news and entertainment purposes. So with that in mind, like I said, today I'm just going to be breaking down what a ZK rollup is. Now, more or less what the whole point is like ZK rollups are aiming to fix Ethereum scaling issues. Ethereum right now, in my opinion, is acting like a big shitcoin. High fees, large issue scaling, like it's just not like, it's not ideal. Especially considering when you say like, oh, we're here to solve Bitcoin's problem in a white paper about fees and this and that, and their fees are like $100 to send $50. Or to, you know what I mean? You want to buy an NFT and your NFT, you end up having to pay double the price of the NFT and the gas fees. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a smart system. Like, that's just a waste. You know what I mean? Like, at the very least, when Bitcoin costs a lot to send something, it's because, you know what I mean? It's like storing value. It's pretty much like the biggest of the coins. Like, there's a lot of reasons as to why Bitcoin can be expensive and get away with it. There's no reason Ethereum should be that expensive and get away with it. At least not without, you know what I mean? Like having more functions in their product without having any issues with it. And that's just my personal opinion about that. You know, there's some people that will argue that Ethereum is the king. Me personally, I think that Bitcoin smart contracts could hurt Ethereum, because that could be something serious. Bitcoin could have smart contracts built into it. There's a higher chance that there's not as much of a need for Ethereum. So it's like Ethereum, really what they had was the fact that they had lower gas fees and a lot of applications built on the fact that they could do certain things. But now that the gas fees are going insane, people are hitting a point where they're like, we need to fix this. So more or less, we understand what scalability issues there are. Like, it basically just means like there's so many transactions that the network bottlenecks, and then it costs a lot to start sending things in order to try and like pay a premium to get your transaction approved faster. And that's kind of what's gotten people to move to like Solana and Avalanche and look for layer 2 solutions, right? A lot of people have criticized Polygon as a layer 2 solution simply because a lot of people's issues with layer 2 solutions is that they're not technically as secure as the first layer. You know what I mean? Like, because the second layer is basically just being put there to operate for the first layer to make it more efficient. But the thing is because it's a separate layer, that layer isn't a secure layer. So they have to figure out a system now that could make the second layer as secure. Enter a ZK rollup now, right? They're just trying to figure out a way to lower the prices while being able to do it in an efficient manner, right? So block space is limited. Because of that, they got to figure out like, okay, if we can only send so many transactions per second, how do we figure out a way to basically make things happen, right? And what Rollups offers is a way to outsource computational data and send validity proofs back to the Ethereum mainnet, right? So this saves block space and allows for transactions to be bundled together, further reducing the amount of data committed to the mainnet, meaning that when transactions are bundled together, the gas fees are split between many users. And the rollups offer almost a near instant transaction speed because and it can reduce like the fee factor by a multiple of 50 or 200 while maintaining the security of a decentralized like Ethereum mainnet, right? More or less what they're saying is that by bundling up transactions or like rolling them all up together and creating it for one block and then having basically having a record of all these transactions bundled together, you could create a system that'll reduce the fees, because if you have 50 transactions being bundled together, then technically it's like the gas fees are always going to be roughly about the same. So if you reduce it by 50 or 100 or 200 people, then that's going to be a huge difference, because if it's $1,000 gas fee to send $1,000, it's not worth it. But if you're 100 people sending $1,000 at a $1,000 gas fee, then it's worth it to pay $10 to send that money afterwards. It's viable. What are zero knowledge rollups? This is where it's going to get a little bit more technical. So rollups come in two flavors, optimistic and zero knowledge. Now, it's going to explain what an optimistic one is. And optimistic rollups assume that transactions sent back to the base chain are legitimate, and transactions only get rejected if someone watching the chain can prove that they're fraudulent by submitting a fraud proof, and then proving that it's fraudulent. So it's like an innocent until proven guilty approach. Whereas a zero knowledge rollup, or also known as ZK rollup, generate cryptographic proofs that demonstrate transactions are legitimate when sent back to the mainnet. So transactions are only accepted on the basis that they can be proven that they're legitimate, right? So it's like in an optimistic approach, it's like there could be a lot of shit sliding before it actually gets found, and that could become a major issue in the long term. So for me, the way I see it is a ZK rollup is actually much better, because if every transaction gets vetted before it gets put into the blockchain, there's no chance of it becoming an issue in the later stages. So imagine it's like at the beginning of an optimistic rollup situation, you could potentially be looking at like, okay, a year later, someone finds a fraudulent transaction, and then that could potentially hurt the whole blockchain because you've gone too far. And then if the blockchain is getting frauded on the regular, then the whole blockchain loses whatever credibility it has, and it's done. It's unraveled. It doesn't matter if it's Ethereum or not. If you could fraud it, no one's going to stay involved with that project. So optimistic rollups, for me, even if they're not an issue right now. Hey guys, so we had a little technical difficulty there, but we just fixed it. So I'm just going to pick up back where I left off. And if it's a little bit off, well, I guess you're just going to have to shoot me. So more or less, I was talking about ZK rollups and optimistic rollups, right? And how optimistic rollups are basically innocent till proven guilty, meaning that they take in transactions. They only basically check for fraudulent stuff when it's proven that it's fraudulent, right? So you have to prove that the rollup is fraudulent in order for things to move forward. Whereas like a ZK rollup takes the opposite approach, which is a guilty till proven innocent validation approach. And it's like, okay, well, like everything in order for it to hit a rollup, which is multiple transactions rolled up into one to reduce fees, then this right here would basically be like, okay, all these transactions have to be proven non-fraudulent. And then once they're proven, they're allowed into the system. And I think that ZK rollups are going to be a huge game changer, simply because, like, let's say on the optimistic rollup uses, they end up basically rolling up a bunch of fraudulent transactions over the course of a year. If, let's say, hypothetically, it gets proven that those transactions were fraudulent, that could severely hurt the network, meaning that it could potentially like unravel it, even, in my opinion. Because if you find out that a year's worth of transactions are fraudulent and you can't actually trust the network anymore, and it's been doing that for a while, like that's not going to be good. That's going to be a huge problem. And even something like Ethereum could potentially, die off if that happens. Right now, we're basing a lot of things on the optimistic rollups because that's the more easy adoption thing, right? So it's like optimistic rollups have seen the most adoption because of how easy it is to develop applications on them. Optimistic rollups can support full smart contract functionality straight out of the box, and developers can code applications using Solidity. Basically, what it's saying is that optimistic rollups are the biggest thing that's being used today simply because they're the easiest thing to use. Right now, as it stands, like Arbitrum has attracted over $2.5 billion of total value locked in DeFi applications based on an optimistic rollup strategy, right? Like it says here, right? So some of the optimistic rollup challenges is like, because of their approach to validating transactions, funds sent back to the Ethereum mainnet are subject to dispute for a period up to a week. And this could be a real inconvenience to some of the users because it breaks composability, meaning like if it takes that long for things to be like disputed, like we don't know what could happen in that time. Even though they've improved on plasma-based solutions like Polygon, they are generally regarded as inferior to ZK rollups, and I kind of agree. Regardless of having a dispute period, they offer scalability improvements of up to 77, so like a factor of 77, so 77x times better, more or less. And ZK rollups have no dispute period, and they offer improvements of a factor of up to 500. So it's like they're factoring it by a multiple of 500 times better than an optimistic rollup or the current Ethereum layer 1 solution, right? The main issue is that ZK rollups have not reached the same level of compatibility as their optimistic counterparts. ZK rollups have validity proofs accompanying every transaction. Their technology is much more difficult to construct. ZK rollups have been developed to handle simple tasks like direct transfers and trading. While integrating smart contract functionality is possible, it's proven a lot more difficult. So it could be used mostly for transactions and stuff, but for smart contract coding, it's a lot more complicated. That's more or less what they're saying. More or less, Vitalik Buterin predicted that development of fully composable ZK rollups could take several years, but they're saying that developers are ahead of schedule, and several ZK rollups are getting ready to deploy solutions that are mutually composable and interoperable across other rollups. So even across rollups, right? So I think what they're going to start doing is they're going to apply the ZK rollups into the optimistic rollups to like try and build them in, so that way like they don't have to work backwards while they figure out this issue. More or less, they even mention here to like solidify what I said there is the development of ZK rollups will allow for shared communication framework between Ethereum, mainnet, and multiple layer 2 networks, meaning that where most networks can share liquidity to overcome the biggest challenges layer 1 blockchains face, ZK rollup based networks will not need to compete for liquidity in order to deliver efficient trading through decentralized exchanges, and instead will be able to work cooperatively to scale Ethereum. So they're not even trying to take Ethereum market cap. They're just trying to be a part of Ethereum to solve the problem. So that's always an interesting feature, right? They mentioned here that they have another unique feature. Transactions become cheaper as more people use them due to the way fees are calculated. So let's say each batch of transactions, the amount of users transacting increases, right? That means that like the total cost, like I mentioned, $1,000 transaction rate, for 100 people sending $1,000, that comes out to $10 in transaction fees. But let's say now 1,000 people want to send $1,000 each. Now that $1,000 gas fee is divided amongst 1,000 people. So now it's $1 to send it. So the reason that this is actually probably going to be very valuable is simply because if more users come, that's the kind of system that would be able to handle that usage. And then blocks would basically be scaled in a way where it's like bundling transactions on the second layer to implement them into the first layer in one shot to save block space and to save transaction fees and stuff like that. More or less, it says that there's 2 different types of ZK rollup being utilized on Ethereum scaling solutions, but the first and most widely used one is Z-snarks. Basically, it says succinct, non-interactive arguments of knowledge. So snarks were the first type of zero-knowledge proof discovered, and the early blockchain project Zcash used them as early as 2016. Snarks from the majority of ZK rollup developer libraries and published code are regarded as a strong option for Ethereum scaling projects. One big drawback of snarks is that they require initial creation of keys that are used to create the proofs required for the transactions. If the keys in the trusted setup are not destroyed, they could be used to create new tokens out of thin air and falsify transactions. So that's the one main drawback of a ZK rollup. It's the fact that if they're not handled properly, meaning that the keys that create them are not handled properly and they're not in trustworthy hands, it could potentially unravel the system. Like that could really mess up a lot of things if that happens. And it's important to be able to understand that that's something that could happen. And you definitely got to be aware of the fact that that's a possibility. So even though rollups and snarks have a lot to offer, they do come with their own risks with it. More or less, it's saying that snark-based scaling solutions could potentially promise 2,000 transactions per second in its current iteration, and they want to basically create more possibilities out of an EVM-compatible environment, so on and so forth. More or less, the main focus of ZK Sync is to create rollups that could be developed to write smart contracts with Solidity, right? So those wanting to develop on ZK EVM can write smart contracts using Solidity and Ethereum's program language. Basically, ZK Sync is the other potential thing that you could use, right? Or rather, it's one of the things that like they want to use to create ZK rollups for smart contracts. Here's the other type of ZK rollup. It's called a Stark, right? So scalable, transparent arguments of knowledge. So Starks offer an advantage over Snarks as they rely completely on hash functions and don't require a trusted setup. And this means that Starks are theoretically more secure than Snarks, which has made them the favorite of the Ethereum Foundation, meaning that Snarks are one way of doing things. They're the original rollup. And now Starks are basically a more efficient rollup with more security. I think Starks are more likely to stay in terms of rollups, right? Starkware is the first company that uses Starks to scale Ethereum and is currently the main driving force behind the development of Stark-based technology. More or less, that's just to finish that Starkware thing and say like that could be potentially something that's worth looking into is Starkware if it becomes its own crypto. That's what a ZK rollup is. More or less, Polygon is creating something called Nightfall, which is launching a testnet to provide low-cost private Ethereum transactions, and they're going to be using ZK proofs to make that possible. One of the things that I found kind of weird is that when they mentioned the Polygon ZK rollups, they mentioned the greater efficiency of ZK optimistic rollups. So I don't really know if it's a ZK rollup or an optimistic rollup or a mixture of both, but Nightfall is planning to approach that for Ethereum as well. So Ethereum is going to be leading that for them. And that could be another reason why Polygon is valuable. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up here was this, right? I found this other thing too. It's called Crypto Schmo. I'm going to put it in the description. It's basically like, explain it like I'm 5. So I'm just going to recap everything I said from this perspective as well. ZK rollups are smart contracts that scale Ethereum network by processing multiple transfers off the main block. They then send validity proof back to the main chain as proof of validity. This reduces the amount of data being sent through the main block, enabling faster and cheaper transactions. ZK rollups are one of the options being developed for layer 2 construction to increase scalability. Loop Ring LRC, which is another token that I've mentioned in my channel, like my Telegram channel before, but I didn't really hold it, but I might consider getting back in soon because of this, is a ZK rollup layer 2 solution that allows for high throughput, low cost trading and payments on Ethereum. So Loop Ring is one of the main tokens approaching that. And then it says here, again, explain like I'm 5. So explain simply, a ZK rollup is a smart contract that takes hundreds of transactions off the main chain, bundles them into a single transaction, and sends validity back and forth. And I really want to express that in this video so that way it's like when you see it, you'll walk out knowing exactly what a rollup is on a technical way, and then in a way where you could explain it to another person if you have to, right? So this reduces the amount of data being sent through the main block, the main chain, and enabling faster, cheaper transactions. For a more detailed thing, you could just watch the first part of this video again and read the description for the sources that I'm going to send you guys. And you know what I mean? Like that's more or less it. It's like the whole point is to roll them up into one massive transaction and then just send it out. So that way it could be done without having to add another blockchain or fork off or this or that, right? And because of that, it's cheaper and there's less data needed to basically be included to make things happen. And then from there, it's like you could technically, if you're creating a rollup, you're breaking down all the different variables of that transaction, even if you're sending it as one. And it says here, the 3 ZK rollup platforms with their own cryptocurrencies are these ones. So Loopring, LRC, ZK Sync, and Immutable. So if you guys are bullish on rollups, maybe these could be good coins for you guys to look into. And I would even consider looking into them myself. So I hope this video was valuable and I hope it answered some of the questions that you might have had about ZK proofs and ZK rollups and basically like how this whole thing works. I tried my best to explain it in a way where it's technical to some degree, like technical for a non-coder, and then, you know, that way anyone who's reading it or watching it could understand. So if you watched up to this point, thank you so much. We appreciate all our subs and all the people that have been watching. We really, really care a lot about what you guys think, and we appreciate that you've watched this channel grow, and we'll continue to watch it grow up till 10K. And definitely like, comment, subscribe, and follow for more videos and all that fun stuff. Take care.